Okay, hello everyone and welcome back. If you could please take your seats, and if you've been looking at the outside board, please be aware it is incorrect. Our next session right now is actually about making waves. We're talking about water parks and the future of water parks and where we all see things going and their impact on the community as well. My name is Yael Koifman. You've probably seen me today anyway, but again, I'm with LDP. We're an economist company that looks at the market and financial feasibility. And I'd like to introduce you all to Brian, Chris, Robert, and Roger, although not in that order. I was reading them from up there. Sorry about that. Okay. Roger, Brian, Robert, Chris. There we go. No, nobody's done it right. I'm going to ask each of them now to just stand up quickly and give like a 1-minute introduction on yourself, your background, how you got into the industry, and you're only allowed 1 minute, please. But I want everyone to know what a fantastic group of panelists we have. Go ahead, Roger.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, God. Sorry, good afternoon. Good start. My name's Roger Curry. I work with water technology. We design and have another part of our business that also builds water parks globally around the world. Personally, I've had the privilege of working in the Middle East now for 30 to 35 years. So it's almost like I'm on the third generation of water park development across the region, and particularly fascinated by the work that we and many others are currently doing as the Saudi market starts to kick in. Some really exciting, very prestigious projects coming online. I'm here mainly to have the opportunity of talking with Chris Schwartz, which is an opportunity that I don't get very often. So.
Okay. Brian, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Brian Fish. I am an executive director for a undisclosed project under the PIF, but hopefully we'll be able to tell you about that fairly soon. I come from a water park background. I was a lifeguard at 16 years old. It wasn't supposed to be a career, but coming through university, I was offered a management position that was paying just a little bit better than entry level into my field of study, and I was loving it. And 30 years later, here I am. I've done about 8.5 years in the region. Also have spent some time in Hong Kong, and the beginning of my career was in the US.
Robert?
Robert Surjak, founder of Whibbit Sports. We started creating floating water parks 28 years ago. Born and raised in Vancouver. Our company headquarters is in Düsseldorf, Germany. And everything started with a pool noodle. I have a background in kinesiology. And doing rehab, I just noticed how much fun people had with a pool noodle. And I thought, what if we created some other activities in the water? What would that be like? Thank you.
Chris?
Hi there. My name's Chris Schwartz, and I have the pleasure of serving as an executive director for Seven. We're looking at a number of projects. You would have heard a number of Seven colleagues speaking earlier, so I'm not going to get too deep into those. I got into the industry because Wet n Wild was 20 minutes closer to my apartment than Walt Disney World was. And honestly, that's the truth on why I'm in the water park business, is because gas is expensive, and it was 40 minutes less gas a day to drive to Wet n Wild than it was to drive to Walt Disney World. So I did go to college in the University of Central Florida, so most of us were involved in the amusement industry in some manner, shape, or form. And I think I kept it to under a minute, so that's the story of Chris. Except I have been involved in the industry since the 80s. Some of you probably were not alive at that point in time. So my career is older than you are. So that ought to tell you something. Thank y'all.
Okay, somebody wants to date themselves. That's fine. Yeah, there is that too. All right, great. Thank you, guys. As everybody can see, they all have a wealth of experience and global experience, which I think is important because it is imperative that we take lessons learned from other parts of the world and see how they apply here in KSA in regards to the opportunities. I'd like to start off with, though, let's just talk about water parks in general. I mean, what is the best bit about a water park? We all know water is fun, but there definitely are some advantages to water parks when we compare them to, say, a major thrill park or a family entertainment center. Chris, go first.
Well, first of all, water's cool, right? Water's fun to play in. Water's a lot better to swim in something than it is to walk back and forth between boring, hot attractions. And especially in this region, it's a very conducive environment to running a 365-day-a-year attraction. So, we all know that during the summer, it can get a little bit heated. So if you're looking at running an outdoor thrill park, you're going to run into temperature issues throughout the entirety of the summer months. Where water parks, we don't run into that. If you get hot, we've got cool, refreshing water waiting for you. And everybody really does love to be in the water, whether it's just splashing around or going on our higher thrill rides. Guests just have a good time in water.
What about you, Robert? You have some thoughts on this, I think.
Yeah, what I like about the water parks is the different kinds of activities. I classify these as skilled activities and as non-skilled activities. So a non-skilled activity is something you can do with your friends. It can be competitive, like bowling or a zip line. Whereas a skilled activity is more like surfing or wakeboarding. And what I like about that is the movement aspects. It promotes balance, coordination, social interaction, even cognitive development. How do I get from A to B? And these, of course, are things that are lacking, with today's electronic world.
Okay, Brian, anything you want to add? I mean, clearly you've been sucked into the industry for a while, so I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Well, I think to add on, from a revenue standpoint, we generally find a lot better per capita revenue with food and beverage in water parks versus theme parks. So there's that revenue aspect to it. Certainly, I think cost per ride is generally a little bit cheaper.
Lower in terms of the capital expenditure.
As far as the capital expenditure, right. And to your point, one of the things that I think people really enjoy about water parks is, unlike with the theme parks where you're on a fixed path and you're harnessed in, with water parks there is a sense of freedom, and with the ride certainly there's different experiences that come with different rider configurations and a lot more diversity to the individual experience. So you can go and ride a ride and have a completely different ride many times, despite it being the same ride.
Same ride. Roger, I'm sure you have thoughts.
Yeah. I think, and probably as a segue into developing the conversation, to understand where water parks came from, they sort of evolved. I don't think anybody back in the 1930s or the 1940s said, I'm going to create a water park with all these different water features in it. It more or less created from standard public swimming facilities, and somebody tried putting a few slides in, and slowly these different types of models came up. And by the 1970s, which is generally recognized where a more distinct water park product emerged, and indeed where the majority of the foundations of, I would suggest, our industry began, you almost had two parks.
Hold on, let me get that for you.
Sorry about that. I got my prompter script. It emerged in two areas. First of all, into indoor water parks. This is where the European market came from. That tended to be year-round. And then the American water parks, which predominantly were seasonal, except in the areas of America where, like Orlando, it allowed a year-round operation. And from that, everything we're doing today, one way and another, has emerged. And I think one of the key points, and perhaps could lead into your next question, is the fact that, if you pardon the pun, water is fluid. It's found its own way into a whole realm of other areas. It started as pretty purist. You had not so much on the indoor parks. They normally needed some sporting facility or something added to it. But the outdoor parks were seasonal, and when they closed, they closed. When they opened, they were open. And out of that, emerged the market that we're currently right in the middle of seeing bulge forward again today.
Yeah, and I would actually add one more thing, to be honest, is that one of the best things about water parks is that it's multi-generational. I mean, it's not specific to teenagers or children or parents or young adults. The entire family, from grandma down to the baby 2-year-old, can enjoy it. So it actually is one of those few elements that appeals to the whole entire family unit, and especially in this region where you have extended family units, that's incredibly important. But I do want to move on, as we said, and as Roger led into very nicely. Just to talk a little bit about the fact, our idea here is how do we integrate water parks into venues? And the truth is, that's not a new idea. It's not about integrating water parks into venues. I mean, water parks and water park hotels have historically been around for a long time. Water parks have also historically been the second gate for a theme park. And they've kind of been like the ancillaries, like secondary attraction. Now what we start seeing is a shift in that. And I just wanted to hear the thoughts from everybody along those lines, because water parks now have the ability to be the star of the show. So, Robert, would you like to address that first in terms of your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, I think that the water park in general is expanding with new sources of revenue streams or amenities. Things like stand-up paddle, zip lines, offering more. You mentioned demographics. These are for ages 4 from 94. So I think that it's expanding to offer more activities, and I think that's really appealing to that demographics that we have.
What about you, Chris?
I think with the history of water parks, as Roger was talking about, when we started the water park industry, it was fairly simplistic. Our slides weren't that technically developed. In some cases, we were carving things out of gunite, testing them and adjusting them to get a safe ride into play. So for that, we could easily see where that was going to have that second gate mentality with it. Now fast forward to where the water park industry is now, and we have very highly technical rides. Rides that the experiences that we see on these rides, zero gravity experiences. We have drop capsules. We have a lot of newer technologies, uphill water coasters that we didn't have years ago. So now water parks can certainly take their position as the prime attraction, the anchor, if you will, and then have the ancillary development come around there, where before, maybe not so much. The first water park that opened was Wet n Wild in 1977, and it was by today's standards, it was a very basic park. And it still did very well. But now contrast that with what we're doing, especially in this market, and they have entered into the realm of taking a deserved anchor spot, if you will, for an entire complex.
And I think one of the other things we have to talk about is also the benefits of creating that destination, which is extending the length of stay. So, and the reach of the water park. Back in the days when it was just a day visit, you'd get people from 2 hours away maybe, and that was it. But by doing this clustering and integrating it with hotels and other elements, you're actually driving people to hit a destination, stay for several days, and do a really positive economic impact as well as job creation. But we'll go into that in a little bit. But Brian, did you want to add anything about thoughts on where things are going now and the sort of integration of water parks with other activities and how water parks are now the star?
Well, I think to Chris's point, we've really seen an evolution of the water park to where now a lot of the bigger developments are coming along and positioning themselves not as water parks but water theme parks. So the lines are really blurring, and we're seeing elements of both that's really making water the star, to your point. So, and to echo a point that was made earlier as well, when you're able to have the water element, that creates activities that are doable year-round in this environment that we have.
Roger, any thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, again, sort of continuing this evolvement theme, I think two of the transposable elements and one of the reasons of water parks' success is, one, it brings football, and secondly, it is predominantly a family orientated happening. And that fits in very nicely to a whole range of other leisure orientations, and hotels and destinations particularly being one of them, which is where most people have seen it. But it's not new. You know, Center Parks, which was the European model for this, started in 1968. It was a camping site, it had a few villas, and a very guy with a lot of foresight built a dome water park that he put an ETFE or the equivalent of it in those days over it, and built like a 3,000 square meter indoor park with a wave pool. And for a while, that set his village, his holiday village, apart from anybody else, to the point where he went on and built about another 10 of these across Europe. And that then started to merge with a similar process that really double-kicked the American industry that had gone very nicely, predominantly based on outdoor pools from, say, 1975 when George Millay brought in Wet and Wild, to getting towards the millennium, where another water park family, the Watermans, decided to sell the outdoor water park they had, and with the proceeds built a hotel and differentiated their hotel in a very, very busy area, holiday resort area of the Wisconsin Dells, and differentiated it by an indoor water park, 365 days, with an outdoor water park for the summer season. And therein kicked off a whole new era of water park technology. So it is an evolvement.
Yeah, it's continuously evolving. And actually, you brought up a good point, which I'd like to throw out there. So we're saying that if you cluster water with ancillary activities or whatever, you can create that destination. But maybe we should talk about a couple of examples. You know, what if there is no market? Okay, so Wisconsin Dells, there was no market, but they were able to create one. But what about, let's just talk about, Chris, I know you have some thoughts on Wadi Adventure.
Well, for me, Wadi Adventure was a beautiful park. It was just in a challenging market. You know, it was an adventure sport oriented, which even shrunk the demand market for that particular facility. So it was a park that, although again it was fabulous, and I liked going to that park, but however the market just didn't support it. So that lends itself to any business, though. We have to be smart where we do our investment. We have to listen to our guests who tell us what they want. If we want to build a family park and we design a teen park and it doesn't fit the demographic, it's not going to work. So part of that goes into the pre-work, if you will, before you start doing your initial concepting, is just looking at your market. Are you going to build a tourist park? Are you going to build a local park? How big does it need to be? What's your projected attendance? All those metrics that go across business globally are the same things that we need to look at to make sure that our facilities and projects are successful.
But I think part of that also comes down to understanding your market, but also what your market can support. And that's part of one of the best things about this panel, is that we actually have a whole range of products out there. We have the fully themed, full-scale water park, but we also have, let's call it a water attraction or a water course, which is what Roger does, which is lower capex, but can still, you were talking the other day about a place where you put something in and all of a sudden everybody was coming there. It created a destination. Do you want to tell us about that?
I think I'm kind of a fan of, build it, they will come. And speaking of the Wisconsin Dells, there's a location called Land of Natura. And they focused on three things. One was avoiding lineups, family fun, and something for everybody. And they've had a huge success. They have these floating parks, but they've also diversified, with having these on-water and side cabanas, volleyball courts, trying to cater to everybody. And so far, it's been a pretty big success.
And I think, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Brian, but one of the interesting things is with technology now and, crystal lagoons or things similar to crystal lagoons being out there, if you pair that with, you know, like the inflatable water parks that Robert does, you can actually reach a lot more communities in terms of smaller markets. What do you think about that? Sorry, you have to put your PIF hat on now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can just assist a little bit on the crystal lagoons. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see a dozen of these lagoons. A lagoon can be made by a company like Crystal Lagoons, the Cloward Group, Martin Aquatics, and it's basically bringing a body of water to a place that doesn't have that. You know, we're looking at maybe, you know, a 4-acre lagoon in an 18-acre property, and it just allows you to do things in areas, for example, in Riyadh, that weren't possible. It is a natural or a national resource, although if the PIF approves it, then of course you can have this body of water. And I think this is going to be a really big trend going to the future, is having these man-made bodies of water, and then of course having all of the attractions and amenities around that.
So, and I think this is, you know, a new type of attraction or opportunity, and it's going to come down to a few things. It's going to come down to how you program it, and then ultimately the reputation that ensues from it. Again, with it being new, people don't have much to draw from, so the reputation that you build is going to be essential. So being able to set up a program or operation that's going to be safe, that people feel comfortable coming to, that is fun and engaging and repeatable, these are all elements that are really going to define whether these type of things are going to be successful or not.
Roger?
Well, Yale, the first thing I would say to Chris's point on the Wadi Adventure was always start any project with a well-written feasibility study. And I would suggest you probably know where that can be done. But the point of that is, what was that integrated into? You know, what was it? And I think it was undefined at the time. And I think there also lies like a warning almost. If you take what I believe two of the principal factors of water park, footfall and family based, which are the successes of Kalahari's, of Great Wolves, of Centre Parks and many others beside, if you stray from that or you venture into new areas, as indeed we are in this very region right now, you're straying away from what is proven into something else that's going to be a new dimension and very likely a new area. So I'm thinking of all the adventure based. I'm thinking of all the stuff which Robert's company has been producing and pioneering, and there's clearly a market for that. But it's to understand where does adrenaline and adventure fit in alongside that, because generally they become more tailored sports with less footfall. So there's place for them. We're seeing it happen. I know it's part of our next discussion, so I won't go into it right now. But just do it with caution and do it with preparation and understanding of what you are actually merging this with and why.
Well, it was interesting. I did a panel yesterday where one of the key things was, when you're coming up with the original concept for something new, don't be afraid to admit you were wrong. Mm-hmm. And take a step back and say, what is the right answer before you start building? Because if you start building and then realize you were wrong, it actually costs even more money. But I want to turn a little bit, just shift it a little bit before we start looking at the future. Currently, right now, what are the key sort of challenges that you see within the industry here in KSA and the region, to be honest? You know, that could be cultural or weather or you know, staff elements. Each of you, let's start with Roger. Go.
This is where I think we move a little bit on, following on from my last comment, from integration into what I would term more as a fusion, where you're actually starting to blend things together. And that is where I'm seeing a lot of the projects we're now doing, as opposed to the second gate and a theme park sitting side by side, they're perhaps merging into one ticket, but over 2 days. And that's a subtle change, but it's one that opens up a whole load of more doors. Retail, for example. The hotels invariably come with that as well, as you take advantage of those extra 2 or 3 nights in the area. And it's if you take surfing, just look at how surfing has gone. We heard yesterday about taking the stand surfing waves forward. That's become a whole industry in itself. You know, surfing is now back into the Olympics, or in the Olympics for the first time. So there are areas where these more extreme opportunities lie. And as I say, I'm not seeing that so much as integration. I'm seeing it as fusion. And for fusion to work, it has to be a marriage, and there has to be more work for a feasibility, if you want my opinion.
Someone's got to do it. But no, I mean, just seriously, I'd like to talk about supply chain issues, because there's so much going on right now in the kingdom. There will be challenges, and I'm just wondering, in terms of your thoughts, how do you deal with them? How do you mitigate as much as possible? And supply chain being human capital as much as, hard resources. So, Brian, I'm going to give you that one.
Well, I guess to address your ending point with human capital, there's 2 things going on, I think, in the kingdom. One, there's the effort for Saudization, which, it's all of our responsibility to bring in the Saudi nationals and help them and prepare them to take my position, or to take Chris's position in the near future. And all of these activities are very new to the kingdom, so they didn't start out like we did as 16-year lifeguards. Hopefully some of them will start out as young lifeguards and will be able to develop then, but there's other unique needs of bringing in management and preparing them. And how do we strike that interest, that excitement, that passion in them, one, but 2, maintain it. So it's developing those programs that keep them engaged, and you're able to not only impart the wisdom to them and the skills, but have them stay with it and continue on and continue your legacy. But then from the expatriate side, where there are those gaps, either for people in the local market that don't have the palate to do certain jobs, or you just have the sheer amount of people that you need to fill. When you bring them in, there's opportunities. As soon as they come in, there's opportunities. So again, how do you engage with them to make sure that you're providing a work environment that they want to stay in? So I think from a challenge standpoint, it takes extra money to invest in that quality of life that you're giving them both at work, and oftentimes we are housing them as well. That's going to be really important to be successful. Otherwise, you're in a constant loop of training and probably having service gaps. So I think that would address some of those human capital issues.
Just to continue from Brian here, I think that operationals is the key. You could have the best product, the best ride, the best coaster, but if you don't have the right people operating that, you're going to have problems. And it's hard to be friendly and nice and, to be kind to every customer that walks by and that you have problems. So I think, really focusing on the operational side, I think that's going to be the biggest challenge going forward.
Any other thoughts on that, or should we move on to the happy stuff?
Well, I guess I'll give a 30-second. Of course, I'm biased because I fell into this industry, fell in love with it, and I never left to get an adult job. But we're creating a market for colleagues, just like we're creating a market for our business. Is that we have to be in a position to convey that it's a job, it's work, but it's a lot of fun. And for the right individuals, they're going to have an exciting career working in the themed environments. And even if you start at a water park and you move on to another facility, we want to bring people into the industry that have the right mindset and have the right ability to learn and adapt to succeed in our market. You know, we always say that one of the barriers to entry is you have to be able to smile. Well, if you can smile, I'm in a good position to hire you because I'm looking for that positive attitude. I can teach you the skills. I can teach you to work food and beverage. I can teach you to be a lifeguard. I mean, I can be a lifeguard. I am a lifeguard, all right? So if I can do it, anybody can do it. So the part that it's conveying the excitement. It's developing that market and developing that sustaining market, which is where we'll be looking at going in the near future.
Okay, right. So that was kind of our negative bit. Like, let's talk about the challenges. Now let's go on to the exciting future bit. And so we've talked about, as we said, you know, hotel and water parks, not a new thing. But now we're integrating new things in there, and we're doing either clusters or full integration. And I'd like to just kind of, you know, start out with Robert, please. And just tell us, you know, what are the cool things that you've seen and what you see for the future in terms of integrating with the actual water play?
Sure. So I think that, you know, the future is going to have not just a classic area of a water park or a classic area of surfing. I think it's going to be all integrated. And, you know, Roger's WTI, and I think he coined the term the other day, fusion. It's really bringing everything together to serve that wide amount of demographics. One thing that I think will be needed also in the future is a focus on families. You know, if there's no family time together, especially in today's world, you know, there's a huge demand for families to do activities together. So I think that if you look at the ride time, you know, there'll be a focus not maybe on a 45-second slide for a family, maybe a 45-minute treetop adventure. So I think spending time as a family together, that's going to be something I think that's going to be coming very soon, more and more within these new locations.
Okay, Roger?
I'm just trying to think of the time I've seen Chris smile, but
there you go.
there's one. I think, to Robert's point, you know, when Whibbit, just taking that as an example, came into the market 15 years ago, maybe a bit longer. My local swimming pool is a 25-meter pool, and all of a sudden these bigger than Lilo type things were starting to take up some of the swim sessions, which, being a swimmer at the time, rather upset me. But all of a sudden it changed a swimming pool arguably into more like a water park, because all of a sudden it wasn't about one block of water with 25-meter lanes in and, I don't know, 20 people swimming up and down, where the only thing the lifeguards were looking at is making sure nobody was drowning. It changed the whole perception of about 30 or 40 people still, but they were on this assault course floating on water, and it was more a case of policing. And that was a subtle change, both to the management and to introduce a new dimension to it. And so that for me is what I would call a fusion of bringing two things together in a blended fashion. And then we saw, you know, water slides. Almost every single city swimming pool now has some form of a little children's play area with a few fountains, maybe a couple of water slides. So this whole integration, fusion of all these sort of things coming together, and then add in things like rock climbing or coasteering or a whole load of other things that can sit alongside it, that is what we are seeing emerging now. And in its fullest form, we are seeing some of the world's largest theme blended water park, whatever combination you want to call it, being built, and actually being built in Saudi Arabia.
Well, yeah, I mean, luckily the website went live a couple of days ago, so we can talk about what's happening out at Qiddiya. And yeah, clearly one of the key things they've done there is they've included canyoneering and surfing and whitewater rafting, and there was one more. Oh, they had the cliff jumping, I think it was. Yeah, so there is the integration of different activities, but I think the other thing, and Robert, you haven't mentioned it, is that there's an area also to although we talked about the fact that water parks are all inclusive, they're for the full family, you can still segment them out for specific target markets. And do your evening events or your luxury VIP events or things. So I don't know if anybody else here has a thought on that they'd like to comment on. Market segmentation?
Well, I think that's right. With a park, you can't be all things for all people, right?
Yeah.
But certainly having those various elements, and I think we've seen maybe about 10, 15 years ago, there was this push of really technical slides being developed and these attractions, and there's almost been this course correction into simplicity again, and you're seeing more of these cliff jumps, more of the rock climbing out of the water, things that are very low tech, but start appealing to the adrenaline segment that these high-tech rides were trying to get as well. So it's really interesting to see how that evolves. But just to pivot, one other thing that you mentioned, water parks have this great opportunity to be different things at different times. A water park during the day is very engaged and there's a lot going on. But when you shut the water off at night and you just have the pool lights on, the things that you can do for group events, for banquets, in Hong Kong, we had weddings all through the season because of the location and the way those pools looked. So you can really diversify what you can do with it if you're creative.
Yeah, it's about being creative to sweat the assets as much as possible, basically. I think, the other thing I just wanted to touch on a little bit was, they, as you said, these fantastic new thrilling slides and whatever, but what percentage of the guest actually uses it, and what's its real value? Chris?
It's cool. Cool sells. So it is something that your typical guest might aspire to. I've operated drop capsule slides for 10 plus years, and a number of abandonment issues where guests get up, they get locked into the capsule, and they say no, I don't want to go, is fairly higher when compared to other attractions that are out there. But there's something for the under 1.2 or the child who just gets tall enough to go up and ride that slide, or he's been asking mom for the last couple of years if he can go do it, and she's been saying no, and this year she says yes. It's a sense of accomplishment. Honestly, just getting to the top of a 40 or 50 meter tower is an accomplishment in and of itself in the middle of the day. But those attractions, although they may not be the complete broad-based appeal that a lazy river might be, it's still a segment of the market that is that thrill seeker. They want that next water slide just like they want that next roller coaster. They want the roller coaster that's the tallest in the world. They want to ride the water slide that's the tallest in the world. So it is akin in that general direction. Specifically to that would be, I'll leave it at that. It's cool.
Yeah, and it offers value as a show.
And that's right. Although the ridership is much lower compared to your family rides or your traditional flume slides, the viewership of it is significantly higher. And if you're clever in your design and you position food and beverage elements around it, then that drives revenue there as well. So although the usage of the slide as far as actually getting on it might be lower, there's all those other advantages that come with it. So it's not something to be discounted.
Thank you. Roger, do you have anything you'd like to add in terms of some key cool new things or trends that you see happening?
Was
Come
that one
on,
of the
Sid.
questions I was meant to think on?
We had plenty of stuff to say the other day.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. The majority of the new adventure-based ideas are predominantly low activity, relatively high yield in what you can charge for it, but invariably the tall water slide drop or the people climbing up a rock face to ring a bell, a surfing system that people are watching. There's only one or two people on it, but there's normally 50, 100. I'm thinking of Wild Wadi now, Chris, where you would have 2 or 3 people on the rides, but you'll have 100, 150 people watching, buying a coffee, sitting out, talking with the family, watching mum, dad, or the young 8-year-old go for his first surf ride. So what is the capacity of that? It's the capacity of your park predominantly. So adrenaline-based is my answer without taking too much time.
I think it also comes down to then you clearly need clever design to reap the full benefits of it, correct?
I'm sorry?
You need clever design of the water park to reap
Oh,
the
you
full
do?
benefits.
After the feasibility, a clever design is essential.
Clever design is very, very important. We do have a second here for any questions, if there are any questions in the audience. Okay, now, so this is oh, there is one? Okay, go over there.
Hi. Thank you for this panel discussion. I think it's. Do you hear me now?
You have to hold it really close.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to thank you for this discussion. I think it is very enlightening. I had a very quick question in regards to water parks, and I've written it down. I will try to be as fast as I can. Right. So, considering the primary revenue from water parks are the ticket sales. What are some other yet effective revenue streams that could be integrated within water parks and in the whole ecosystem?
Sorry, can you repeat that and just hold it a lot closer and speak louder?
Okay, do you hear me now? I heard it. Right. So my question was basically something that is similar to, for example, if we're speaking about cinemas. We have concession sales, which significantly boosts the overall revenue of the whole asset, right? What are the other smaller things that we've seen, we mainly see in water parks? Robert have mentioned cabana rentals, for example. I've heard F&B concepts. But what are the other things that we might want to also look at when designing or considering water parks?
And the question, did everybody hear the question? The question is, what are the secondary revenue streams into water parks? F&B, of course, is a huge one. Our F&B programs are becoming a lot more smarter than they were historically in terms of menu offerings. You know, they used to just be your typical, I'll cook you a burger, you know, something like that. But we're starting to see higher end menus. And with that higher end menu does come higher end spending. So more complicated menus. Of course, retail. And retail is a whole discussion unto itself. Local market versus tourist market, you know, sun cream versus, you know, souvenir rash fest, those types of things. Fast pass, where you can get quicker access to the rides. Of course, rentals, both locker and towel. You've got preferred parking. You know, we're starting to see additional amenities pop up in the water park, you know, from a spa, you know, type of experience. We've got photos are beginning, well, I really thought photos would be gone by now because of digital, and I'm surprised at how resilient that market has been. It's actually a phenomenal market currently right now. If you put the camera in the right spot. What am I missing?
Well, I think you also have the cabana type of revenue, especially if you diversify your cabana offerings And not only when I mean diversify your cabana offerings, both in size and in level of service as well. So you can package those with meals. You can package them with other souvenir type of things. Those are often great revenue sources. The VR add-ins. You see a lot of virtual scuba diving things coming up that seem to be in the right markets quite popular, especially if you curate the right type of experience from the visual standpoint.
I mean, I would add as well, I mean, with some of the stuff we were talking about today, things like zip lines or whitewater rafting or even surfing, those would, by definition, because they're lower throughput and lower capacity, would have to be upcharges. So that's clearly a revenue source.
Yeah, and ultimately, if you can program your day to entice people to stay, length of stay is always an important thing, but getting them to stay into those meal hours. So if you have a reason for them to stay, a show or whatnot, that brings them into the next meal, then that increases your overall spend for any given day.
Okay, are there any other questions? Oh, up front. We got 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. There's a conspicuous missing demographic on stage, which is the fiberglass manufacturers. And so I was curious in your opinion, you four guys, if fiberglass is necessary to call it a water park, or is it all the other stuff all the other activations and interesting things that happen that could become a water park without all the fiberglass?
I would say fiberglass does not define a water park.
I would agree. I think a water park is where you have fun with water.
It's part of it.
Okay, along those lines then, we're going to wrap up, but before we do, I'd like to ask each of our panelists here to give one key takeaway that they want the audience to take away with them. One sentence, no more. Chris, I'm going to start with you.
Since this session's about fusion, water parks are not, we've talked about this off and on the entire time, and this is going to be a run-on sentence, is that water parks are not just about water attractions. We use water to entertain, but that doesn't mean we only have to use water to entertain. There's several other things that can be brought in the facility that provide entertainment value that may not have anything to do with water. Because at our core, that's what we do. We want to create memories worth repeating. We want to create enjoyment for guests that they want to come back and see us again and again and again. So that's what I want to leave you with. Since this is a session about fusion, is that water parks, as we evolve, are not just all going to be just about the water. Those will always be our centerpiece, but it won't be all that we do.
I'll just leave it with families who play together will come back, and come back.
You can design the best water park in the world, but it's all about the people and how they make the guests feel. Invest in your people.
It's a recipe. Rick Root and myself, a few years back, we put together a program of presentations where we called it Just Add Water. And what we're doing is sprinkling or pouring water onto a family-based large footfall, and we stick to that program, and one way or another, you've got a very successful future.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I'd really like to say thank you to our panel. They've been brilliant, and unfortunately, we've run out of time. And we have our next session starting shortly. So thank you, everyone.